Hello and welcome to a pro basketball show with me, Andrew Willett. We're in the midst of WNBA coverage and excited to bring our content to you. You can catch a pro basketball show on streaming services such as YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify with live broadcasts on playback. Make sure to follow us at APBShow on social media platforms such as Twitter and Instagram, with more coming soon. Without further ado, a pro basketball show. Hello and welcome to a pro basketball show, and today we are going to talk about the Connecticut Sun. Finally, we have gotten this far into the season. I've been looking into getting this going, and today so thankful to be joined by the guest I am joined by, but looking to talk about the Connecticut Sun with the play-by-play man for Connecticut. He also works as the play-by-play guy for the Maine Celtics, the National Lacrosse League on ESPN, and hosts for the Action Network HQ, Action Podcast, DraftKings, and 98.5 The Sports Hub in Boston. That's Brendan Glasheen. Brendan, thank you so much for joining me today. I know I have been very happy just to even say that I know you, and you've been very helpful to me. So thank you so much for taking the time. How are you?
Of course. Thank you, Andrew, for having me on. Been a good week here in the WNBA. As you said off the top, we're off and running. It's already 2 weeks long. We've already done our broadcast team has done 7 shows. They played that one game out in New York a few weeks ago that was picked up by CBS. We've already done 7 shows in 2 weeks. So it's like when it gets here, it gets here. So we're off and running and happy to happy to be back for another season. So we're off and running.
Yeah, at this point right now, we're in between 2 games against the Las Vegas Aces. The first one just wrapped up last night. The Aces able to hold off a comeback from Connecticut. But before we kind of get into the Sun as a whole, that game, how was it broadcasting with Andrea Carter and that whole crew that is just so good to work with?
Tarika Foster Brasby is our sideline reporter. I love Tarika. Got a chance to get to know her now the last couple years. Tarika was actually filled in as our, and by our, I mean the Sun. The Sun had Tarika fill in a few times in 2021 as their in-arena host. And then Tarika joined our broadcast last year as our sideline reporter. Like my first year, we've been rotating in analysts. And when I saw that Andrea was going to be part of the mix, I was very excited because following women's college basketball, she's everywhere. Following ACC men's hoops, I caught her on some of the Big Monday broadcasts with Shulman and Billis, who are 2 of the best in the biz. And then, of course, her W coverage. I was very excited, and as advertised, Andrea was great. Just the way she picks apart the game, she does exactly what I think a great analyst does, which is tell you something as a viewer, the how and the why, and not what you saw. Like, it's TV, you can see it. Most people that are watching or tuning in are seeing the game. Tell me something I don't know with my own 2 eyes. And the way she can compartmentalize that, weave in thoughts, it was a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to Thursday. I think we got some chemistry going as the game went on. Thankfully, Connecticut made it a game after a slow start. So I look forward to that challenge, working with different people all the time. So, but Andrea was phenomenal. From what you could, it's weird. Like, you can watch it from afar and then witnessing it right next to you was pretty cool. So great to work with her. Great to work with Tarika. Like I said, it's a good crew. We've got Connecticut's not the easiest place to get to, Andrew, for a lot of people. Players, coaches, the league itself. Like, it's one of the toughest travel dates in the league as a visiting team. So to assemble some great people has been awesome.
No, and great job on the call as well last night. It was a fun game to follow. Like you said, Connecticut made it a game. So let's just get right into the Sun. And I want to start with their offseason. Obviously, a very young season so far, but the offseason, I don't think it's a great look when you lose former MVP in Jonquil Jones and a Coach of the Year, I think multi-time Coach of the Year in Curt Miller, to New York and LA respectively. But I was one of the big believers in what this roster brought back in some of those trades and in free agency to kind of reload I mean, even before the performance last night, Rebecca Allen, very high on, Ty Harris, Olivia Nelson-Ododa.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the Tiffany Hayes trade is just kind of one of the most undervalued, underrated moves of the offseason. And I think more than anything, with the pieces left over from last year's squad, I think it was almost a better fit for them to kind of not only fit into this roster, but excel in their roles. And that's why coming into the year, I had Alyssa Thomas as my defensive player of the year, Stephanie White as my coach of the year. And then I think I pitched the wrong Connecticut player, but at the time in the preseason, I had Bree Jones as my MVP heading into the year, followed by the likes of Elena Deladon, Asia Wilson, and then Alyssa Thomas I did have in fourth, who I like now. But what were kind of the organization's feelings and expectations after kind of a rebuild or even just sort of a short-term retooling, if you will?
Well, why even ask me? I mean, you covered all of it right there. No, that's a pretty good synopsis. I think your first word was the better word, which was reload as opposed to rebuild. It's a core that's ready to win. They're in win now mode. So essentially now with the JJ trade, they got a first from New York. They flipped the pick to get Hayes. Allen had a coming out party last night, as you mentioned, and then I think Ty Harris. They're still trying to figure it out. Like point guard and what Stephanie White is trying to accomplish in this new offensive system. It's not that Alyssa Thomas can play any position, the versatility both ends. So, but the point being is everybody can touch the ball. But Stephanie's first Zoom calls with the team when she got the job were with Heidemann and with Harris when they made the Harris deal. So, because the point guard has to be bought into what they're trying to do, especially playing off the ball, which they're still trying to establish. But no, I mean, it starts with the core three of Alyssa Thomas, Brianna Jones, Tawana Bonner. And it's still a work in progress, as we saw last night, as we saw in the second half of that New York game. But the upside is there, and Stephanie is still trying to figure out rotations and how to get the most out of their bench, which we saw what they're capable of with Allen and Dejanay Carrington was phenomenal in last night's game. So I think the pieces do fit. But what we saw last night when you play one of those super teams that everyone has hyped up, more so in Vegas because their core is still continuing over from a year ago. New York's got talent, but their core is so new. The only two players that they brought back from that core, well, not only two, but as far as starters, Ionescu and Laney, they just got Johannes back. So, and they've got pieces, man. They're going to figure it out. Sandy Brondello is a great coach, but their core pieces that they brought in are all superstars that are new to the team. But Vegas added Candace Parker to already a great core. Stokes comes off the bench, gives them great minutes defensively. Alicia Clark is an underrated pickup who started all 29 games she played in Washington last year. So it's going to take some time for the Sun. Offensively, we saw what I think the worst they can be, which is if they don't take care of the ball against a really good team, they will punish you. And the stunning stat of the night was Connecticut allowed 13 fast break points in the first quarter. They had allowed, going into that game last night, number one in the WNBA in fast break points allowed, meaning fewest allowed, at just 4 a game. They allowed 13 in 10 minutes. That cannot happen because the Aces will just pick you apart. Their poise, their composure, been there, done that. When you have a title, any level of basketball, NBA, WNBA, these players play overseas. College, not so much because you're always churning out new classes. But at the pro level, when you get that one title, the confidence you can play with is unmatched. And I think Connecticut came in last night really juiced up, fired up about the game, and the Aces came in ready to go. And Asia Wilson had talked about this. They had not been getting off to great starts their last couple of games. Indiana took them down to the wire. They blew a big lead, which they almost gave away last night, as we witnessed. Atlanta, they had a big lead, nearly gave it away. But their starts weren't all that great in those games. Their start was really good. So I know it's cliche, like it's a work in progress. They're still trying to figure it out. And I think this is a great week for the league and for these two teams, more so Connecticut. It's a measuring stick kind of week. And let's see what you look like against the top tier teams in the league. The start was not great, but they will fight. And that is what will remain true with the Sun. their fight, their toughness, and their commitment defensively. And you can't play great defense when you're turning the ball over because now you're flat-footed. You're trying to backpedal on defense. And they, as you noticed, they exerted so much energy to make the comeback. So the comeback was great, but you have to put so much into that when you get in a hole against a team like the Aces. And it kind of caught up with them. So in A'ja Wilson, face-up game is just, forget it. It's game over when she gets that. It's just a little bit of wiggle room. And Jackie Young, can get overlooked because she's sort of a quiet assassin. Chelsea Gray kind of wears it more, her personality on the court. But as it pertains to Young, holy cow. When she gets, and Andrea called this out a few times last night, when she gets into the middle of the paint, in deep, what do you do as a defense? That you got Plum on one corner, you got Gray who can knock down the outside shot, you got Candace Parker right there who can finish around the rim, and then there's A'ja Wilson who's got one of the best pull-up games in the league. So it's a measuring stick week. I would not be surprised if Connecticut comes out guns blazing on Thursday, ready to go. So we'll see.
I love it. And so
I threw a lot at you there. I know it's like the work in progress thing. It's cliche, but that's really where they're at. There's a good week for them to figure out where they stand.
And I think that's kind of the main question with this team. And I asked you kind of coming into the season how they felt about their offseason. The word you used there, the reload word.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people
said that too. That's a good word.
I think a lot of people thought it was more of a rebuild for this squad. They didn't have have very high expectations for them. I think Darius Taylor, the general manager of this team, had a vision in mind and did great work rebranding this team in the offseason. But that was kind of my next topic there was the super teams. And so the question for this team really becomes can they at some point get up to the level of a Las Vegas, like you said, adding a Candace Parker to an already cohesive unit, the New York Liberty, who will continue to improve as the season goes along. And as Darius Taylor said in that in-game interview with you, I think just a couple of games ago, there is no paper championship. You still have to go out and play the games in a sense. So I just right away, can this team finally capture that evasive first title after being the best team or one of the best teams for 5, now 6 years?
I think so. As long as they stay committed on the defensive end. That's why I think Washington's getting a lot of love too, as sort of a sleeper team. But I love the line that Mike Tebow had back in his. We had the coaches had a media day right before the season started, and Mike Tebow, Eric Tebow, pardon me, Mike's son. I'm forgetting that Mike is not Mike's the GM now, and his son is now coaching. But Eric had a good line, well, how much longer can you be called a sleeper when everyone's talking about you, right? And for Connecticut, this under the radar label, it's gone now. When you're 6-1, I think you've gained people's respect. And if you ask, we talked to Becky Hammond last night, what was it like being back in the building where you won the title? And Becky had a great line. She was like, look, no basket that we made or shots we made in this building last fall, those don't carry over. It's a brand new year. They are focused, business trip. They said all the right things pregame. She's got that team absolutely dialed in. They're still playing with that edge as if they haven't won a championship in Las Vegas. But no, I do think Connecticut, the pieces really fit. They want Alyssa Thomas to be their floor general, get the ball in her hands, make the right decision. I know AT is at the top of the league in turnovers, but for her personally, the turnovers, I think, have been cut back. Now, the team turned it over 12 times in the first half. That cannot happen. So valuing possessions, Stephanie White talked about, we cannot have empty possessions on offense, and we have to stay disciplined defensively. Those two things, they didn't check those boxes last night. Now, the question is, because if they want to get over a hump, you got to win a 5-game series in October or end of September, early October. Ideally, it's October if you go to the finals. So that's the question. Can you beat the Aces? Can you beat a New York? Chicago has come alive. I'll be honest, I didn't see it coming. I didn't. I know their guards are dynamic, but I clearly underestimated Kalia Copper being the leader of that team. But can you beat those teams 3 times in a best of 5? And I think as long as they stay committed defensively and defend without fouling, which we saw last night, I think the free throws ended up being about even. They're going to run into some trouble. So they have a small margin for error. but it is possible because I do think the pieces, you saw what Beck Allen could provide. I still think there's more to see in Ty Harris. They're going to figure that one out. I think Natisha Heidemann has taken steps. She's been phenomenal, a lot stronger, finishing around the rim more, guarding the other team's best guarded Arike on Sunday. Then it's like pick your poison with that backcourt, trying to stay in front of Jackie Young. And they threw some double teams at Young at points later in the game. So they made adjustments on the fly, probably a little later than I think expected, because again, like I said, you really have to pick your poison with that group. But I do think the pieces fit. And we saw it's really hard when you think about it. And I thought Kurt Miller got really a tall task last year, having to try to balance, getting Alyssa Thomas back as comeback player of the year, trying to play a different brand, not to mention you've got the reigning MVP in JJ. You brought Courtney Williams back, who had been a winner or helped that team get to the finals in 2019. So there was just a lot of moving parts. And as you know, in the W, Andrew, you don't have a lot of time to figure this out. You're playing so many games. We hear this so often, like in the NBA too, with young teams, like you don't get a lot of practice time. In the W, it's that like times 10. You don't get the time. You've got to be, it's game to game. You're figuring yourself out. And I said this to someone the other day. If you really think about it, right? The entire league, player mobility has existed because when you have the 140, 145 best players in the league, it's hard to crack a roster and hard to crack a rotation. But I gave this some thought. If you look across the league, New York and Las Vegas, I think it's good for the league, the buzz, yada, yada, super team, whatever. But the rest of the league, I think of the 12 teams, 10, and I think the two I'm going to exclude, one of them is a stretch. 10 of the 12 either made a change at coach, so you're a leader on the sideline, or their best player changed. Their best player changed in the offseason. And I won't go all the way through. I could if I wanted to, but if you just go right through it, like maybe I will. I'll do it quickly. Look at Seattle last night. Jewel Lloyd. It's your team now. Stewie's gone. Jewel Lloyd's show now with Noelle Quinn. Look what happened. Seattle finally got a game. Took them a few games to get that figured out. Brittany Griner's back. Brittany Griner's that best player, which wasn't in the league last year. Chicago, just talked about Kalia Copper. Candace is gone. Vandersloot's gone. Quigley's not playing this year. It's your team. Go figure it out. You got the Deladon Mystics, the non-Deladon Mystics. Now it's Deladon trying to play without restrictions. That's a new look, new coach. Granted, the coach had been there as an associate coach, but Deladon's now their best player for the entire season. That's not to say she wasn't their best player when she played, but you're paying. It's two versions of the Mystics a lot of times. But now that it's Deladon this year for a full season, right? Connecticut, you changed their coach. New York, as we talked about, that's obvious. Their best player changed. It's Stewie. Minnesota, Nafisa Collier, your team. Fowles just retired. You go up and down. So the two teams I'm leaving out, Vegas, because I think Wilson is their best player, but it can change any given night. But their coach, and by the way, their coach is only in year 2. And the other team, Indiana, Aaliyah Boston, right? New coach. But the other team I was going to throw in there was Atlanta, because I think Ryan Howard is still their best player and Tanisha Wright is back. But even that being said, a second-year player, second-year number 1 overall pick, and a second-year coach. So my overall point being is this is an extension of the preseason, this first month. And it's hard to say that because, as we know, they only play 40 of these. So by June, if you're kind of out of it, good luck to you to try and get back in. Los Angeles was one I left out. New coach. A lot of moving parts. So it's not going to happen overnight. So the flip side, the positive of that is, I think that's why the games have been so competitive, because everyone is still trying to figure it out. And the player mobility was NBA-like in the offseason.
Yes, it was. And I mean,
Dallas is another one. Dallas, new coach. Now they have Arike, but still new coach, new system. So you go down, new coach, new best player in a lot of cases in the W this year.
And it's kind of creating, like you said, that different type of feel where not all these teams are up to snuff yet. And like you said, some of those teams at the bottom, it's going to be tough sledding. Luckily for Connecticut, they get off to this great start. And I guess you started to mention as well kind of some of the deficiencies for Connecticut, and that was the 12 turnovers in the first half. Yeah. That was the 13 fast break points, 2 great stats to point out. just to start that basketball game, and that's why they weren't in it. And this is kind of what I notice in terms of their weakness is kind of a defensive inconsistency when the shots aren't falling and Connecticut isn't able to kind of overpower their opponent with
Yep.
the physicality, the speed. Las Vegas was ready for that last night.
Yeah.
Um, but just kind of in
And
terms,
and they try and the Sun tried to shoot their way out of it, which you're playing right into what Vegas wants you to do. And when your shot selection isn't great, and that's what Stephanie said about empty possessions. It wasn't that they were. I know Beck Allen got hot, made 6 threes, tied a career high. So it's like here I am saying they're shooting too many threes. Well, they got back in the game because Beck Allen made some great shots. It's the quality of the three, and Stephanie came in like they're trying to emulate the Denver Nuggets who are in the finals. They do this now. They run it through Jokic. The other team, like the Celtics, do this too. They talk so much and doing some stuff with Maine. Same principles. The Maine Celtics G League affiliate. It's the quality of the three. It's not necessarily taking too many threes. It's are the threes quality. So it's not that I don't think coaches go in being like, we need to take X amount of threes. Connecticut's threes, I thought, in a lot of cases, were early in the shot clock, kind of lazy threes. Like, all right, let's try to. Brad Stevens used to say this: we can't try to hit home runs every possession. We got to hit singles. And they try. I think they tried to keep making the home run play to turn a 17, 15 point deficit into 7. And well, it's not going to work against Las Vegas. It won't. But they chipped away. Allen got hot, and I thought Allen's looks were really, really good looks off ball screens. And Vegas probably looked at it like, and Becky Hammond wasn't happy, by the way, when Becca Allen got going. She was not happy with her defense. So, and also too, like, that's why coaching matters. Becky called great timeouts last night. Like they called, I can remember for sure 3 timeouts in the game. I think all in the second half where out of the timeout, Aces 4-0 run, Aces 5-0 run, sort of brought the building back down. But yeah, it's the margin for error is very small, to your point.
yeah, and they just kind of put themselves in a position where one of those timeouts, and they're just kind of hoping that Las Vegas misses shots, and they come right out to an Asia Wilson face-up shot, and then Kelsey Plum hits a 3. So,
and good for Kelsey. Had been struggling, but still playing really good defense. That's why Kelsey doesn't come out of the game. Still playing at a high level defensively. I think now it's 13 straight games with the steal. Asia Wilson's the only player in the league that has a longer streak going. So they're loaded. They're really good. And they play together. And they don't care. Like Asia doesn't care if she drops 30, if she has 15. Asia knew at the end of that game, though, give it to me. There was a switch. She went right by Dejanay, and it was just night. And I'm not knocking Dejanay. Just it's a great player making a great play.
yeah, and I mean, as you mentioned, Kelsey Plum too. I just want to point out, as soon as she gets her shot back, look out for that team because of all of the other pieces they already have rolling. She's going to be off the charts.
Yeah. Well, and Candace too. I feel like Candace is kind of just like flying like seamlessly here. Candace had a great semifinal against the Sun in that 5-game series. I think was averaging 15, 10, 4 assists, 3 blocks a game. And Candace is probably looking at this team like, well, I don't have to be great every single night. And you just said it. Offensively, Kelsey Plum does not need to be great every night. That's the luxury of having great teammates and all pros. I really thought, though, that when the Sun trailed like 15, 17 points, it was hovering in that 15 to 17 to 19 range. I looked at Andrea a few times, like they could be down 25, 30 points. So they hung around because I think Vegas, while it shot their average about 50%, 48, 50% from the floor, I really only felt Chelsea Gray got hot, made a couple transition threes, but really Jackie Young and Asia Wilson were the two that really only beat them. And Connecticut will fight on the glass. They were right there on the glass, as they've always been with when Kurt was here, and the same with Stephanie. Stephanie White has still embraced what they've been. So Stephanie's not trying to change everything. She understands personnel and wants to basically, she's stayed out of the way of what they are. She wants them to be who they are. But turnovers, the points in the paint number was big for Vegas because Connecticut talked about how they guard the fast break. Connecticut was still one of the best teams at guarding the paint. Well, the Aces got to 40 points in the paint, which is their average, best in the league, points in the paint. And at ease quite a bit. And that was a lot of Jackie Young finishing around the rim and A'ja Wilson with that lethal face up or just like, fall away bunny. Just it's really something to watch. Like A'ja Wilson, the way she plays is it's imposing and intense, but also so graceful at the same time. It's really amazing. It's quite honestly, it's ridiculous. She's going to go down as one of the all-time greats, and still just by the way, only in year 6, just keeps getting better every year. And Stephanie brought that up because when Stephanie coached at Vanderbilt, so she was out of the league for 1 year, out of basketball coaching wise, but was at Vandy. I think she saw A'ja for a couple of years, I think, when she was at Vandy. But one thing, and it was a great call out by Stephanie, A'ja under Dawn Staley was just more so like a back to the basket threat. And now her game has evolved to a whole new level where we didn't see this in college. The face up jump shot game that she's added. And now she's taking threes, gets to the line. You really can't complain much about what she brings to the table.
Certainly, like one of the best players. As I want to kind of touch on Connecticut one more thing.
Yeah.
Before it says I'm looking at through some of the stats. They're 5th in defense, 5th in net rating, 6th in offense. The shot hasn't necessarily been there, but they get to the free throw line like crazy. Offensive rebound like crazy. The pace is actually surprisingly low from what I've seen. I know I love when Alyssa Thomas gets out and runs and she's running the break and she's running the point for that. But like some of the new offense things, but I'm curious what you are clearly very high on the fit. Do you think that this team is missing anything, whether that be a few wrinkles in the way they play, or just kind of or maybe a prototype of a player that could help, additional depth or something like that?
No, I think they have the depth. I just think that their core players are a little older. Alyssa Thomas doesn't shoot threes and doesn't have an outside game. But when they get to the line and when DeWanna Bonner is playing downhill, hunting for her shot, and DB has mentioned this, she's in year 14 and she's now with this new offense trying to make the right read, be more free flowing in the open court or even in a half court set. DB was like, I'm in year 14. I thought I'd seen it all, but with this offense, I'm learning more and more about the game that I never knew before. But DB is still one of the top scorers going in the W. They've just got to maximize every possession, and they've got to get a quality look almost every time down, because I think what we're seeing is A'ja Wilson, Brianna Stewart, those players are like in their prime years. Alyssa Thomas, Bonner, they're DB's like kind of past her prime a little bit now. That's not to say she doesn't have anything left in the tank, but when your games are now, with all that said about Alyssa and can't shoot the outside shot, she can still create for others. You talked about offensive rebounding, and you called Brianna Jones' name to be an MVP before the year. Breezy's game is still taking leaps, and they've got to get her more touches, I think, and find a way to just make it easier for her, because she can face up too and knock down a 15-foot jump shot, 18-foot jump shot. So Breezy's getting there, confidence to shoot some threes. Did take one against Dallas. There was a possibility she could have taken one in the game last night, stepped in and swung the ball over. So I think Brianna Jones is still got that quiet confidence about her game. But again, when you exert so much effort defensively, especially trying to make a comeback, you can get exposed, and you can ask questions like you're asking, like, well, wait, do they have enough? I really do. I do think so. It's just they cannot have empty possessions. And you mentioned pace, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because as much as they want to play, and Stephanie's talked about this, now that they're at the bottom of the league, they were sort of like hovering around 7th or 8th, like a few games ago. They're not where they want to be with that. And once they get the most out of their guards, when Ty Harris gets in the mix, we saw what Beck Allen can do as a trailer from 3, coming around a screen, whether it's cutting. She had a layup at the end of the game, kind of off ball, had a nice bounce pass into Brianna Jones. Beck Allen, there's so much to uncover still with this group. So their surrounding cast is going to have to carry them, because what can't happen, and Stephanie's talked about this, and it's really hard. Like, who am I? I'm not a coach. I get it. But it's hard for Stephanie to take Alyssa Thomas out of the game. And when you're playing 37, 38 minutes a night, we know her injury history, and AT wants to play. This is like, AT's not complaining. AT will play however long you need her to. Didn't come out of the game against Dallas, played 40 minutes. Like, okay, when you get to September, do you still have it after coming off an overseas season, Team USA, all that? Are they going to have enough in the tank? We'll see. But I think that's why the bench is crucial. I do think they have enough pieces, though. If they integrate those pieces and they get the most out of the rest of their crew, I think they're going to be right there. I really do.
Yeah, and I mean, I liked a ton of these new changes. I think you could tell that emphasis on pushing the ball in transition early on in the season, while maintaining the defensive competence and just kind of dominance down there, really phasing their opponent and getting them a little panicked by the pace. I think Connecticut should probably go to more of that. But I like the new offense. I liked a lot of the horns actions that they can run a lot of different variations off of. Alyssa Thomas and Bree Jones running bid to bid pick and rolls is really fun to watch.
Yeah, getting easy buckets too. They didn't have many of those last night. Like, nothing they got was easy, and they scored, I think it was 19 points off turnovers against Dallas on Sunday. And when you get easy buckets like that, like we talked about, I mean, that's getting an easy basket, a high percentage easy basket. You can now go back on the other end, set up your defense, and when you turn it into a track meet with Vegas, I think Vegas is the exception to their style, because if you try to play up and down with them, there was situations where, like, there was a play where Chelsea Gray threw a nice lob over the shoulder. I think it was Candace Parker, or it might have been Asia Wilson. It may have been Parker. Parker had an easy late. So Connecticut was late getting back on defense in cases too, because they were trying to play a back and forth trade baskets kind of game. You can't do that. So what has to be remembered about a game like last night is they got in a big hole. And when you get in a hole against that team,
changes the game.
Great comeback. But your effort level has to go through the roof. And that's not to say they don't have it. It's just, you're gonna run out of gas. So their starts have to be much better. You can't get in a hole like that to that team, period. That's just the bottom line. You can't. So, question that you mentioned earlier, in a 5-game series, there was a game last year in that finals that finished in 4 where Connecticut scored 105 points and won the game by 20 plus, because they controlled the pace of the game. So, and we saw with Indiana the other night when they played Vegas, and Atlanta, when it's hard to turn Vegas over because they have so many smart players with a high IQ, all pros. You've got to be committed on the defensive end and then capitalize and maximize your opportunities on offense.
Yeah, I mean, and if
they're
you
good,
don't,
they're really good. I mean, Vegas is really good. They are really, really, really good.
That's true, Brendan. Kind of last thing here.
Hard hitting analysis, I know. Yeah.
Last thing here is, we're talking about this team like they haven't, their only 2 losses haven't been to New York and Las Vegas. They are still 6-2, second in the W. Last thing before I let you go here, what is this team doing so well to be as good as they are so far this year?
They're unselfish. They're all bought in. They're like I know I mentioned like DB. You'd think installing a new offense with veterans and older veterans that have been in the league a decade or a decade and a half. Even younger players that the pieces they acquired via trade, like there what jumped out to me, and why I think, okay, this group's going to get it, and I think they're going to figure it out. There was a game earlier in the year, 2 games earlier in the year. They played Washington at home, their home opener, and they finished the game with 2 reserves in Ty Harris and Beck Allen. 2 days later, they're at Washington. They finished the game with Hayes and Heidemann. And by the way, Tiffany got a little banged up in that game, so that she was kind of caught off guard. She got into foul trouble too. But there was a night Beck Allen played 5 minutes, then she has a night like last night, and they don't complain about it. Like, I think they all know this is a work in progress. They've got some talent everywhere. So I think they're unselfish. They don't care. And Alyssa Thomas just wants to win. DeWanna Bonner just wants to win. They don't care at the end of the day who's leading the team in scoring, who's leading the team in X, Y, and Z. They are fully bought in on finding a way to capture a championship. And outside of last night, defensively, I think they are still really dialed in. They entered last night with the number one, and probably still is, because Vegas didn't kill them from the 3-point line. Number one 3-point defense in the W still belongs to Connecticut. So they're still guarding at a very high level. And they have cut back on their turnovers. Their turnover number last night was not a great example. Dallas, they had 17 of them, but they're like around 13, 14 turnovers, which is better than, I think last year they were hovering in that 18, 19 range. So with the new offense, only 2 weeks in, and they've still found a way to sort of take care of the ball. So, Stephanie White got a team to the finals in Indiana, has won at a high level as a player, as a coach. They love Stephanie, and Stephanie's embraced them. They've embraced her. So I think the buy-in is why they are where they are. And they have played some close games. And last thing I'll say too, I think what we're seeing, it's cliche. And I think people have said this in previous years. And it's one of those things where you're like, okay, but yeah, you should still blitz Indiana or blitz it. The bottom of the league is coming. And I love some of the new coaches in this league. Trammell in Dallas, big fan. Christy Sides has got that Indiana team believing. So now I think it's really true when coaches say you cannot take a night off in this league. Vegas just got tested, won their last 2 before the Connecticut game by a combined 9 points. So I think it's more true than ever. You cannot take a night off in the WNBA, because I think those teams, the bottom of the league is started. Now they're not at the Vegas, New York talent level, but I think the league is now coming. It's sort of crunching closer together, where now it's like you can't just mark off automatic W's. You just can't do it. So, but I think we learned something about the Sun last year in close games. They had struggles in the regular season. That comeback against Chicago in that semifinal game, that game 5, I think they sort of turned a corner. There's more poise now at the end of the game. And I thought the Sun, the way Asia made some tough shots, so did Jackie Young, but Connecticut doesn't seem as panicked too at the end of these games. So I don't think folks can really overlook, I know Indiana made a run a few weeks ago. Aaliyah Boston hit a couple big shots, and Alyssa Smith. Dallas made a run the other night. We shouldn't be surprised by that anymore. Seattle was down 26-6, and they make a run. We can't be surprised anymore by the middle tier, lower tier of the league being competitive in these games.
Well, Brendan, we're all very excited for what Connecticut has in store this season. This was a great breakdown. I really appreciate your analysis. Everybody needs to go tune in to the Connecticut broadcast. You do some of the best work in the W, bringing the stats, bringing the storylines, and just doing a great job taking us through games. Thank you so much for taking the time to join a pro basketball show today and to talk Connecticut. You're one of the best helps to me, and I really appreciate you.
Thank you. Yeah, looking forward to Thursday. Should be good. The rematch. The rematch of the rematch.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. Brendan, again, thank you so much.
Of course.
Thank you so much for tuning into a pro basketball show. You can catch a pro basketball show on streaming services such as YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify with live broadcasts on playback. Make sure to follow us at APBShow on social media platforms such as Twitter and Instagram, with more coming soon. Until next time, I am Andrew Willett. Thank you for tuning in.